it's amazing kind of how we kind of became friends because like we're on opposite spectrums, like me and you, definitely when it comes to viewpoints a lot of times. Like
Thank you, friends, for joining me. Like, I've shared so many times the love and admiration and appreciation I have for a friend that lives in Zealand, New Zealand. And today we have him on the podcast. Armand, thank you so much for joining us. Armand was one of the very first people who, in a very visceral and real level, believed in this journey that we're on together now. And like that is going to stay with me forever, Brother Bay. Your love and support is with me forever. Thank you so much for joining us here today.
oh, thanks, Tristan. I really appreciate that. Yeah, he says I supported him and everything. I just kind of said do it. Um, and but he did it mostly on himself. I was just a friend overseas, like shouting, "You can do it!" I think you owe most of your success to yourself, and I know for a fact there'll be much more success on the way.
It's just a matter of time, Brother Bay. And, even though it is something that I have to do and continue doing, like we're still the ones showing up and we're showing up for one another. And the more we show up, like we had the conversation just a little bit ago, the more that infinity between me and you, between us in this world, grows. We grow in sensitivity, we grow in our capacity to feel into it. So every single one of us plays a role in that. And you have been a massive part of that for me as well. I love you, Bits. Love you, 2 bits, Brother Bay, genuinely.
My same, Estienne. Lots of love coming from this side. I honestly can't wait to catch up with you in person again. It's gonna be super fun.
Dude, it's like what,
You
three
know,
years now? So to you friends who don't know, like me and Armand used to be in high school together. And like I was technically we were never supposed to meet if I just kind of was a good boy and did my did my dues and kind of went to school the way I was supposed to. I would have just stayed in this town that I'm living in right now. But a bunch of things happened. I ended up at Middelburg School, and I met this beautiful man. And the way that me and him really started our relationship, I knew that he was in the hostel for the weekend. We had to stay over for that weekend, and like when you're in the hostel, there's not too much to do, so conversation seems to be the thing that you seek. And I met him. I told him, want to come over to my room. He came over to my room about 9 a.m. and we heard a bell. We had conversations and we hear a bell. And this bell is basically the bell for our dinner, which is 5 p.m. at night. And we've been having a conversation just the entire day, not breaking, not like moving out of the space, just one on one, bleeding infinity into infinity into infinity. And that conversation is still with me, man. Like the conversations we had there has been serving me to this day. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity to do it again. And in that space as well, having been friends from that, we made this promise to one another that in 10 years' time, we're going to, come hell or high water, meet one another again. And now it's like there's 4 to 3 years left on that 10-year time frame, and it's bonkers.
can I just say the second you said like we heard those bells, I got hungry. I seriously got so hungry. I remember starving like 12 at night or 10 at night, being like, "Damn, I kind of regret missing lunch." Oh, those are some beautiful conversations. They definitely are still with me as well. Like all the topics we talked about. Again, like as we were talking about previously, like we're we're on opposite spectrums, like me and you, definitely when it comes to viewpoints a lot of times. Like when we were talking, it was just, and we never like argued. It's more of a like providing information from a different side and then trying to counteract that sometimes. It was very Socratic in a sense of way, and I love that about our conversations. It wasn't, you never felt that energy of like I'm trying to change your viewpoint completely or all. It was more of like this is what I believe, this is what I see, and this is what the world is offering me, and you'd be like, yeah, I see what you see, but this is what I see, and this is what my world's offering me, and it's kind of a bettering process and all of it.
Oh, dude, and I'm so happy that you share it so eloquently and beautifully because it has become a very big part of the way that I try to share messages as well. And I've had other friends kind of say the same thing to me, and like it's in this way where I didn't even realize that that is the way I was trying to do things. And ever since having you friends share that perspective with me of like we're not trying to change one another. We're sharing from this place of this is what the universe shows me. I'm just showing it to you. What do you think about this? And being able to genuinely sit with someone, listen to their perspective, grow with them in your perspective, in both of your perspectives, it allows us so much more than we ever would be able to do if we were by ourselves, only believing in our own stories.
100%. I agree fully with you. I kind of itching to tell you this. I'd love to hear your opinion on this. I've been reading a bit of history the last while, and like I really have this thing now for the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks, where I've been thinking to myself about like our connection to one another, like as human beings, um, off like more from a metaphysical plane. Like I was listening to some podcast and reading about. I don't know if you're very familiar with Joan of Arc.
No, I do. I do know about her, yeah.
So you know her main story, like she's just some peasant girl that heard voices in general, and she kind of heard the voices. And the voices told her just be a good girl, go to church, pretty much. And eventually, the voices told her, okay, try and go to your uncle and get to the king. You need to rethrone the king and put him back in power, and everyone, you're going to be the one to keep France's monarchy. No one else. You're going to be that person. These voices just literally told her that, and she literally rode off and showed up in court, some pimply, illiterate peasant girl, and she changed France's whole history. You know, like France has been involved in this 100-year war, for the listeners that don't know. And she completely like they just lost Agincourt, a massive battle. They lost so many people, and she somehow managed to convince the king that she'd lead the army, and she turned the war around completely, and actually had him crowned in a city that was taken by the English, where all French kings had previously been crowned. And all of this just voices in her head, and I wondered like what would be a rational explanation for that, because there's so many like stories like that where people like I just had this energy or this vibe, and like I don't know if you know, I've told you Essen to go read Alexander Solzhenitsyn as well, but when he was in the gulag, he literally say when he was talking, because there'd be people in the prison cell with him usually listening, one of them would always be someone who would go rat on them and then extend their sentence or make their sentence harder. And for some reason, he said while he was in prison, he would talk to people and he just get a sense of who you could talk to. You could just feel it in his heart as he would describe it. And he would immediately, in that moment, the second he met a person, be able to say, like, do I tell this person or don't I? And he never got caught in all his years of talking all this stuff, all this bad stuff about Stalin and why people were caught. And I just find it so interesting. I don't know. Another example, sorry if I'm ranting,
Please.
is as Socrates. Like, you know, Socrates talks about his daemon.
Mm.
And he also says, now I always thought, I don't know if this is the thing, right? I might be incorrect here, but he said his daemon was the voice that talked to him. And I always thought that's your inner voice, like your conscious. And I don't know if her voice or Alexander Solzhenitsyn, these are voices that are more prominent, more loud, maybe, like say in the case of Joan of Arc. Um, but Socrates also like ended up going through this whole process of just listening to his daemon, his voice, which kind of like got him killed in the end, with his like case, of course. And the same with Joan of Arc, like the voices actually told her like, you're gonna get caught and you're gonna have to accept your martyrdom. And I just found that like so intrinsically interesting this entire week.
So, like, it's so fascinating to me that you share that because it's something that has been coming up in my life as well. You know, like for instance, talking about voices that tell us to do things. Like at the start of the year 2021, at the end of the year 2020, technically, I had this voice sitting, and looking over the farm that told me, tomorrow you're going to start streaming every day. And whatever why why I had to do that wasn't clear to me, and I didn't understand how that was going to really work out for me. And yet, because I listen to that voice, that intuitive nature within me, I am on the journey I am on right now. We're having this podcast because of that right now. So, like, and it's so fascinating because Joe Rogan, like we talked a little bit about him before we started this podcast as well. He actually has this idea about ideas almost being entities in and of themselves. And instead of human beings being the ones that discover these ideas, ideas almost give them to the being that is most equipped to actually realize it. And in that case, Joan of Arc was one of those beings who could actually realize the idea that wanted to be realized. And it's this whole trip of like talking about, you know, the interconnectivity that we all share as well. And I don't know if you know, but I recently had a very psychedelic experience with marijuana, where I was basically, during the day, the stream's topic was knowing everything so that you can be anything. And like one of the things that I kind of hit on in that stream is that within infinity, technically you can't know everything, because as soon as you know everything, infinity clicks on one more, and then there's things again that you do not know. But within a fifth dimensional perspective, in the same way that a two-dimensional, you know, realm of existence can be observed from the third dimension, the fifth dimension would encapsulate even the dimension of time, which means that everything that happened within time and within those three dimensions would be able to be clearly like viewed from this fifth dimensional perspective. And I kind of alluded to that being in a way what consciousness is. Like we have this perceiver, this awareness that is true within each and every single one of us, eliciting a response from this external world, and the responses that gets elicited, the person that we are gives us information that allows us ideas, that allows us to realize different things in our lives. And I thought about it in this nature of the grand subconscious as well, where I find myself doing things before, you know, like I'll be like, so for instance, now I'll be doing something, thinking about something, doodling something, and then later in the night I like do some breath work or some meditation, and then whatever I was doodling, was thinking about, was meditating on, comes back to me in a way where it gives me answers. And I feel like I'm not necessarily the one that is making those answers. It's like I'm getting those answers from a higher source, a different plane of existence. And it is a fascinating question. Like, and like just to kind of like cap it off, that night I smoked a little bit of bud. I did some breathwork exercises, and I was like in a very firm like lotus pose position, just like breathing very intricately in and out, in and out. And it genuinely felt like in that moment I was tapping in to what the everything would be. And I was getting fractions, literally just like little fractions, little slivers of that everything. And it was like I was receiving information that I didn't know how to use. And it was like instead of having ideas come to me as it normally does, I was just where the ideas were. And it's fascinating. Like, what do you think
Yeah,
about that?
I think that is 100% nail, hammer on the nail head. Like, if I was thinking, like for example, like when you said like the universe giving ideas to the person who's most capable, that struck me the most. Like, because I immediately thought of like the Christian dogma. I think Shannon told me this one day. Like, hearing like the Holy Spirit or something like that. You know, not that I'm advocating anyone to do, just saying the similarities. But yeah, like hearing the Holy Spirit, for example, like if that is like a link somehow, and people saying like if you don't listen to this voice, and I remember like if you don't listen to this voice, the voice will find someone else to do it. um, and it's the same thing. I've had that exact same experience where I'm having ideas, um, and I'm trying to figure out like what do I want to do, you know, and there's nothing in my head. There's not a single idea. And then one day you're just doing off the randomest thing, and you're thinking like, I want to do this, and then all out of the sudden this idea hits you in the face. It just hits you at like a truck. And I find like I've been trying to start writing them down, because I've realized in my life that I've had all these ideas come at me and I've just let them fade away. I thought they're like, that's a brilliant idea to the idea graveyard you go,
Yeah.
and you forget about it. Yeah, you never think about it again, and you have all these wonderful ideas, but ideas are currency, and I think we as people need to open up to this voice, like you say, and just be open to this mistress, like of our muse to give us these ideas. Because I honestly do think it, like you said, it's we're getting fractions and answers. Because it's never like when I get an idea, it doesn't feel like I thought of that. Like a brilliant, like top of the line idea, I'm not like I thought about that. Like especially creative ideas. I'm not saying like you planned something very arduously and came up like, okay, there's two solutions. These are the ways. And but even a creative idea, like usually it just feels like just fell out of the sky. Is that a good way to put it?
Yeah, it's
Like,
beautiful, beautiful. Like I'm resonating so much with you, and like I want to share two things that I'm noticing. Like one, I'm completely there with you of trying to save those ideas because, as you're saying, like we have these ideas so significant, and I mean we feel so true about that, and then we're like, oh, this is amazing, and then we just kind of continue with what it is we're doing, believing like, oh, that idea is in my mind, it's gonna stay in my mind, and then again a week later you're like, what was that thing that I thought about, and then suddenly it's gone. That is like one thing I've noticed, and because of that I've made like an intention to like take my phone, just hit the record button on like the voice recorder app, and just kind of rant for a little bit, and that has helped me trying to like get my ideas down as well and try and save them
mm,
somehow. And secondly, is something that I want to kind of elicit or allude to the fractal that is inside of your mind. So right now you have a certain fractal of brain patterns firing, right? To kind of like elicit this conscious response, conscious experience that you're having from this world right now. And I believe those ideas are technically just these fractals of brain activity that kind of like happens haphazardly sometimes. So even though, yes, those ideas, those fractals might be very hard to access afterwards, it doesn't mean it's ever gone. Like those fractals of understanding is still within you. And like to talk a little bit more, like I didn't, expect that I would have an opportunity to. But during that, like weed smoking and meditation session, after I like went through like a very big bout of breath work, I started making these sounds of like almost, in the Christian way of seeing it, speaking in tongues. But instead of thinking of it in this
mm,
way where the Holy Spirit was speaking through me, I was speaking words and thinking about those words in the context of infinity, in the context of neural activity. What does my brain have to do? How does my brain have to fire to make these sounds, to use my tongue into different parts of my mouth to make different sounds that I've never made before speaking Afrikaans and English? And how is that influencing my brain? Then I started thinking of it in this context of like eternity and time and infinity, in the context of different creatures coming into this world, and how many variations of the mouth you can have, and how the mouth that we have right now makes these sounds. And I was like kind of thinking about this way of you say certain things, and everything that has ever been said, like right now, I'm saying things to you and it elicits a response and understanding within you. Saying random gibberish within infinity can be something articulate in a different language, different time, different alien species. And just me saying it can activate that neuronal activity, potentially eliciting an idea, a response from the universe in doing so. And as soon as I had that thought, it felt so true to me. It felt so crazy, as in, instead of having to receive an idea, I say something random, and then there might be an idea captured in that random saying because of infinity.
yeah, that's actually a pretty good way of putting it. Like it is any sound you produce. Like you can basically create a whole new language. And it's strange, like how we communicate. Like to to what is the word? I've forgotten. Oh no, I've done it, Isjan. I've forgotten a word. Like what is it? To divert the conversation. Oh my god,
Like
just keep
redirect it?
moving.
No, no, it's good. Like this is okay. Like
Yeah,
it,
when
have a moment of like
yeah,
being humbled again. Yes, okay. I'm still a human
oh,
being.
damn, it's so humbling. I've been thrown away from my tippity top chair. Yeah, no, it's the word I'm looking for is the one when you divert from the conversation. You don't want to. You're sorry for not staying on the main topic, but it's like communication. Like it's so weird how like different people and different cultures and ethnicities, how they communicate, and what they find is, especially when it comes to body communication, like body language in general, like the differences in culture, like what a hug would mean, and what, like, how touch plays a part, and just looking at one another. Like, I think different peoples are told different ways of being able to register what other people are feeling and how they come about. And I find that just as interesting, like you said, just the sounds in general and like the movements. It's all different.
Like,
What would you say about that?
you're making me like think about infinity again, like, and I think that's why it's so valuable for us to spend time with other people, spend time with people especially that do not have the same perspectives that we do. Because, like, for instance,
Mm,
when I went to China, like I got to see a way of living, a way of, carrying yourself in body language, a way of speaking with people, a way of talking about people. And even though I don't necessarily think I'm trying to implement those values in my life, because I was allowed to witness it, I was allowed to experience the neuronal activity associated with it. And now I'm a more, full person because I have the capacity to experience what those emotions kind of entail. And now it can inform how I want to have other people experience as well, how I want other people to be like listened to, how they want to like see someone carry their own body language. We're constantly learning from one another in that way.
it's like interesting as you say you should spend time for people. Like, controversial points. Like, I actually have a few things to say about like I 100% agree with you. Like, I think like American media and stuff has like really polarized the whole world society. Like, you can't say anything without it becoming too political these days. Like, if especially when you're like, I believe to totally like you should do everything for the betterment of the people. Like, if you always thinking for the betterment of the people, then you should always come to a unilateral decision. Somehow there should be some common ground. It's not, let's kill each other about this obscene topic. And I find that so strange that people don't seek controversy a lot of times, because it's so easy to, in our dichotomy, to have these opposing viewpoints in our head. And we don't even realize we have this contradiction. And you need to talk a lot of times. I find talking to people and actually arguing my viewpoint, I'm constantly digging myself for where a weakness is in my viewpoint, or my if there's any contradictions. And I find those constantly. And those usually turn my viewpoint to some degree. And sorry, to continue on what you were saying, um, it's like when you said like we should mix with different people. I immediately thought of these cultures that are isolated, or societies are completely isolated. I don't know if you've read or heard of Yomi Parks.
Like, I'm not sure, but my mind is going to cannibals that, shoot and eat people if they get close.
Yomi Parks is a North Korean defector,
Okay.
and honestly, I would, dude. She has both a podcast and a book. I'd recommend. I'd say I read the book, and then I heard, oh my gosh, she's on Joe Rogan, and I went back to like episode 1000 or something, and I found her. Um, it was pretty awesome. I would definitely give you a recommendation to go listen to her podcast. That is some next level stuff, man. Um, what I was getting back at, to like in North Korea when she escaped, and she endured some serious horrors. Like, it really puts in perspective your life again. Like, when you hear someone experiencing all these horrible things, and they come to a world like ours, and they just see how different things are. And she said the language, like from North Korea and South Korea, are exactly the same. They all speak Korean, but they don't have words, and they don't use words in a certain way. In North Korea, you don't say I, you just say we. You only say we. We
Yo.
had an idea. We're hungry. We're thinking of things. And there's no word for love either. This girl went through her whole life. The only way she got love communicated to her was through, not verbally, but through a body language, a sort, I'd imagine. And that just struck me so hard, because love, I think, is like the biggest, like, biggest word I think of any language. Love is like the thing that hits things in the centerpiece, you know?
Dude, it's crazy to me that you say that because like the whole message that I try and bring in the streams as well is that love is true. Like as a statement, as a way of living, as an understanding for why it is I keep showing up every single day. And it's just that, love is true. And the fact that they don't even have the word for that, like weirdly enough, as I was hearing you talk about this we understanding, like we know in psychology, like for instance, if I want to manipulate you into doing something, like I would use we words as well of like, imagine how we can like thrive if this thing and this thing, and imagine how our futures can be more bright. And in that way, you can basically coax people into serving the things that you want them to by making them feel that they're a part of it. And how North Korea basically used that psychological narrative to turn people into these obedient zombies, not allowing them to share the fact that they love one another, even though they have this understanding of this we. Like a part of myself thinks there is value in the we mentality of we're not just doing this for the I, which we all are. Technically, we are that fundamental I. You can think of it as an I, like the actual eyeball looking into this world, or the I that you're referencing when you say I am whatever. But this we understanding, like being able to live into this world, into the seventh generation, because we are going to benefit from me doing this. We are going to see a better world because of this. But then, while that is good, how it's juxtaposed with this inability to have love in that situation, and how that basically turned everything upside down. You have to have love within the we for the I, otherwise it doesn't work.
I agree fully. I 100% agree because it's so strange. Like when you said like that it's a language use of like controlling people. I didn't view it as that at first. And you saying that, at first I thought it was just like some communist idea. Yeah. Like what a bunch of commies. I put that aside. Like but now that you said it is definitely a manipulative use of word. Like it's so common in like George Orwell as well. The use of doublespeak. The use of language is probably the most important thing when it comes to controlling people effectively. Apart from the fact that you need a total iron fist and someone to enforce your rules. But if you have successfully taken over language and successfully manipulated it to your will, that is a tool to control people. It is 100% a tool.
That's like crazy, dude. Because like you're really opening my mind up to what is happening in North Korea as well, and how this dictator has been getting away. Because I genuinely believe in the strength and the power of the individual and the power of people to change the worlds that they're living in. Like we have the means to manifest the realities we want to be living a part of. And the fact that they kind of hijacked that ability, they they basically manipulate these people into becoming lesser versions of themselves through language. Like that is crazy to me. I've never even thought about that.
Bro, that is actually one of the scariest things for me in my life at the moment. Like, I after reading like Solzhenitsyn, again, recommend it to anyone who's listening. If you haven't read the Gulag Archipelago, please go read it. I think that's an awesome book to put some perspective in what happened in the Soviet Union. Um,
Horrifying. And it's
After
and like just to interrupt you for a little bit, it's almost like it's happening all over again, with all of these sanctions happening in Russia right now as well. It's horrific, dude.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and this is what I was saying. Like, I saw like Solzhenitsyn. I think one of the bits in the book that struck me the most is Solzhenitsyn. While he's talking about all the stuff happening, he doesn't blame the Soviet Union. He doesn't blame them one bit. It turns into the self dichotomy of like, or the self blaming of himself, saying,
Hmm.
"I'm responsible for the Russia we are in today. Not
Taking
not Stalin.
responsibility.
Yeah, I could have voiced my opinion, even at the cost. And that is like my greatest fear. Like having that one day where you're gonna have to be, am I gonna stay quiet or am I gonna say something about this? Even though no one agrees with you. It's Socratic, it's Socratic, it's Joan of Arc. All of these people usually are against the flow. They're so against the flow, and it usually ends up with you burning at the stake. But it is so important. It's so important. Society tends to martyr the people that are correct, but it is so important people do it. And if you don't do it, you end up with a situation like that where no one's in control and all our freedoms and abilities. We're in this literal hell of humanity. You're literally in hell. There's no better way to describe it.
And the thing is,
And
like,
I
we're
find that right.
creating that hell, you know, and it's again, it's this like difference between people being disempowered by language, by rules, by fear, and then this duality of you are the one that's creating this reality. Like genuinely taking full responsibility for the world you're living in is something that not a lot of people want to do. And when someone does that, it kind of like illuminates the fact that you haven't been doing that. And that can like respond, you can respond in two ways. One is you're like, oh, what this person is saying or doing is true, you know, and there's some value in it and I should be listening. And the other response is what this person is doing is saying is true, but I don't want to be listening and I don't want to change. So I'm going to, you know, fight against it. And you see it over and over and over again, even with Jesus Christ. You know, like that was exactly the same story. It's almost like an archetype within humanity to hate the ones that's
Oh,
trying
that
to teach us the truth.
That is a great way of putting it. Like it is an archetype. It's 100% an archetype. I thought of that first. That is a great way of phrasing it. Thank you, Istan. Like I definitely that put a few things in my mind for the if I ever have to conversate this to someone else. It is 100% an archetype. Like it's such a recurring archetype. It's like society has been hiding it for so long, like trying to say like, don't do this again, don't be bad, and we keep doing it. There's so many of them, and it's repeating. It keeps repeating itself. And if we can't listen to that one voice of reason, because it's so easy to fall into the mob. It's so easy to get scared or peer pressured to say, well, because society thinks it's different, I'm going to stay quiet. And what ends up happening is half of society thinks the same thing. And because we're so scared. And I think that's why a lot of people who succeed in this world are the individuals who go against the grain. Like they are the high performers. So like, well, society says I can't do this, but that's what I want to do. They might say it's impossible, but I think it's possible. Those are the people we root for in society in general. Those are people when they reach success, we're like, wow, that's come on, it's common sense. But that's the biggest risk for anyone is to take that leap of faith. Like, I'm gonna jump off this cliff and see where it goes. Like, I like it.
Like
You
it's
have to be crazy in
like
some
what's
sense.
cool to me is the fact that, you know, like we have some level of understanding of this as well, you know, and the way that I've basically consolidated an understanding of inside of myself is this tri-layer understanding of us as human beings, where at the very core of ourselves is pure love, pure consciousness, pure spirit, pure understanding, pure essence, pure awareness of where you are. And then that awareness, because it's so aware, it sees things in this world. It sees, you know, the way that the parents try and teach it. It sees the way the world responds to different types of, you know, like experiences, information. It sees these things, and then it starts to tell itself a story about the things it sees because it tries to rationalize. That story becomes your ego. And then that becomes your identity as a person of like, oh, this is the story I've been told. This is the story I believe. This is the story I'm continuing in my mind. And that story basically influences your persona, the person that you then end up showing the world. And if your story and your ego are misaligned, then you feel imposter syndrome. But the thing is people don't realize that they're caught in that loop of, oh, I'm aware of these things. These are the stories I tell myself about these things, and then I'm trying to be this person in the outside world. And because the world and because our awareness is so attuned and so open to information, we get so caught in this ego that we are convinced that that is the only truth. And if the world shows us that people that say certain things, believe certain things, act certain ways, get prosecuted, get hurt, get, hated for it, then our ego on a very visceral level doesn't allow our persona to be that, because it's opposed to the story that we tell ourselves. And by I believe genuinely, by kind of eluding people, illuminating to people that they're pure awareness first and foremost, and all of the rest of it is just a story they're telling themselves, I believe we can collectively awaken from this story. It's just gonna take some work.
Yeah, 100%. That's a real nice way of putting it. Like saying the story is your ego. And I have to ask you a quick question. What's your story, would you say? Like, thinking from my perspective, I remember reading Louis L'Amour in high school. I've tried to read his works again, but he is so repetitive. I don't know how I read like 6 books or 10 books of it in high school, like without realizing it. But the main story is always about this lone hero, a lone hero who doesn't like to be in crowds, doesn't like to get mixed in society, and he knows what to do. He's a competent dude. He's really good at what he does, and he's always in the thick of it, not because of his choice, but because people put him there. And I always identified with that so strongly, to become an independent person who's competent at what he does and is there to save the day, kind of hero type thing. And that's something I've always wanted to push for in my life, is like that. And thinking of it now, that's why I made the link. It's because I've always wanted that like solitude, Alaska type lifestyle. Like, I just want peace. I don't want trouble, type thing going down. And I wanted to ask, like, what's your story? Like, what was your first stories or stories? Because they tend to change.
It's so beautiful me that you say that, because that is exactly what it is. Like, instead of having yourself tell yourself the story when you read something, you're basically experiencing the story that someone else has created, someone else has felt. And, when you resonate, when you identify with a character in a book, it's because you're resonating with that story and you feel this truth in that for yourself. And, something that I would like to say before I answer your question about what my story is how us as a generation, like me and you in the age group that we're in, we grew up with these superhero movies. Like, we grew up seeing on the screen in so many different ways people with extraordinary abilities, people with the ability to be these independent, strong, hero-esque characters. Growing up in Christian households, we have one of the ultimate hero archetypes basically forced into our brains. So I'm not surprised that in this generation, looking at the state of the world, that my persona, my ego first, also wants to be this one of a hero, wants to be this one of a savior, wants to be this one of someone who makes the world a better place, because that's what we need right now. And understanding that every single one of us needs to be that hero, and that's technically why, the collective consciousness made these movies. That's why our consciousnesses were drawn to these superhero movies and we're so fascinated by them. It's because that's what's necessary within this, part of the infinity right now. We have to be the heroes to this world. And, just hearing you gain this understanding lets me gain understanding, lets you gain understanding. And I love this infinity so much.
Oh, definitely. It's definitely like it's exchanging. Like I said in the start, it's exchanging of viewpoints and just adding. Like, even if you disagree with a person, that's what I find lovely talking about you. Like, even if I don't say like agree with the topic, like there's always something to add to your arsenal. There's always something to grab at when it comes to the tree of knowledge. There's also a little bit to grab, and I find that awesome talking to you. That's why I love talking to you a lot of times. Because not a lot of people talk in depth when it comes to, say, like the metaphysical, for example. There's not a lot of people want to talk that in depth. Like, a lot of individuals tend to, and I don't mean this in a mean way whatsoever. A lot of people tend to stay on the shallower side of things, like my day to day, and there's nothing wrong with that. I assume each one to his own.
And like, I think about it in this context of the infinite ocean, where some people want to experience the depth of the infinite ocean, but some people are too scared to put their heads underwater. And we see it in our physical plane of existence as well, where some people get super panicky about putting their heads underwater because it takes a moment of you not having to breathe. It takes a moment of uncertainty. It takes a moment of, what if I don't come back up? And a lot of people in conversation are scared of saying things, thinking things, being aware of things that will be so opposed to their ego story that it will completely make their ego melt away. And like that's literally my philosophy. If you feel your ego melting, melt more.
Yeah,
This is the
that's
only
a
thing
good
that I
point,
can.
eh?
It's like people are scared. Like people have been scared for as long as we've existed, and for the longest time, being scared was something that allowed us to survive. So it makes complete sense
Mm.
that we had to be scared of certain things. But we're living in a world of safety and of comfort and of abundance to the point where the things that we evolved for, literally the epigenetic information within inside of us, is no longer 100% aligned with the world we find ourselves in. So we can kind of like chuck it up to, oh, well, this is the way I'm made, and I guess I'm going to suffer like this forever. Or we take action, and
Mm.
we know now we have the ability to actively influence our DNA. We actually can consciously evolve. And we're doing that. Like, I believe in this very conversation, both of us are evolving because we're exposing ourselves to information in a way that we've never been before. This moment is like just as unique as any other moment has ever been, and we're experiencing it together, growing from it together.
Yeah, it's 100%. It is a constant evolution, hey, like of character and of person, like, and that's kind of why I hate modern day like social media and stuff, because what a person does 10 years ago is nothing to do with the person he is today. Like, it doesn't give a person the time to change and grow effectively and not have his mistakes held over his head constantly. Like, it's like what you put on social media, that is you. It's a bit of you that you put into the universe, but it's permanent. I find that anything else said in the real world does not have the permanence something has that you put on a wall or paint on a wall. And that's essentially what you do when you put it on this like internet like cloud. Like, it's scary because you could be a way different individual, and it's just in the human nature to become better and grow up, and learn and be more considerate. These are just things like we naturally tend to assume. I think one of the ways I heard it put was like when a man like starts to grow up, like, or from a boy, these archetypes in his head, you know, the merchant, the soldier, um and what they become. Like, I think the first one was the hero archetype from a kid becomes the soldier in a man, like in the future. Like, it's like as a kid you just want to be the hero, you want to beat the hell out of everyone and do your thing. But as an adult, when you come to like a soldier perspective, it's laying your life on the line to service the greater good, like for your country, for example. It's no longer about that, like, I'm gonna beat everyone and I'm gonna be the hero of this area. It's now a defense role. It's now
I have a
I
role
need to
to
look
play.
after people. Exactly, and these are the same archetypes that goes from the hero to the wizard to a wise person when you're older. Like, the wizard kind of has a secret trade. I forget who. There's a guy who wrote this book, so I'm definitely out of my depth. He wrote a book about it. I never read it, so I'm definitely on the shallow side when it comes to this information. I apologize, but yeah, that is definitely what I think today. That's a bit scary though. You can't go through that evolution unnoticed.
So
There's always.
like as you were talking, I just had so much like influence and inspiration, flowing through my body. I've had this opinion, this understanding of human beings as fractals, and the way we grow and the information we gain is basically adding to this fractal. It still, consolidates into the same eye, the same base root, the same, solid pillar. But from that pillar, it keeps fractaling out into finer and finer details. And that finer and finer detail is just as much you as that initial pillar was as well. And in that way, the way we move in this world, I believe, is also a painting. Like literally, me moving my arm right now in front of my face. If there was, something taking a picture every, like half a second, there would be five hands. And if you think of it in that frame rate, think about the way that you move through the world, how your essence, how your energy stays in that world as a painting, as a beautiful, mosaic to the rest of the universe. But now, as you're saying, we've moved into this age of more permanence with having the internet kind of like save things in a very visceral and accessible, over and over accessible way. Because we have this, like after I move my hand in front of my face, now my hand is where I moved it to. Like I don't get to see all of the positions that my hand was in as I moved it there. But if I, like take a video of myself, I can play and I can pause, I can play and I can pause, and I can see each and different like little variation. Or I can take a bunch of pictures and overlap them over one another, and I can see all of that range of movement. So I believe instead of thinking of it as intimidating and as a bad thing, I feel it is making us even more aware of our power to create experiences and to live into this universe as something that's beautiful, as opposed to not having to take as much responsibility for our actions and for the things that we do, because it isn't in our minds as permanent.
Yeah, that's the thing in the minds. It's the permanence in our minds. Like, I find that, like, it's like you said, like the fractals resonates quite well with me as well. Like, we are different beings at different times. It is the truth. Like, sometimes you act out of pure basic need. Sometimes pain influences how you think and how your base needs constantly change, and that kind of affects what part of your brain is active, I assume, at that moment, like what's running, and is it emotional? Is it, because emotions are like such a big part of it as well. Hey, you can't just say no to emotions a lot of time. Sometimes your emotions drive you insane, and it doesn't make you act rationally. I find that like the whole internet thing is a whole scary thing for me in general, because this is unprecedented. The whole internet is unprecedented. We have no idea what this is doing to us or how good it is. I from now I think it's real awesome, because the amount of information we can juxtapose to ourselves is amazing. The access we have and the thought we can access, while being, of lower class standard. Like, we're basically, if we're born in Rome, we'd be like peasants. We'd never see these things.
Yeah.
We'd have to solely rely on our inner sphere to tell us these things, and that is insane for me in its own. And the ability we're able to speak the way we speak now, it's amazing the amount of information that can be transferred. But it's also scary to think that we're the first culture to be playing in this and dabbling in this, and I'm just scared we'll be the first one to experience the repercussions and the evil this can be used for. And I'm a very optimistic person. I always, or I sometimes I'm very pessimistic. Again, the fractal. I really like that. I'm gonna keep that, by the way.
Please, please, please.
But definitely, like, the pessimistic side of it. Like, for first time, I always see a lot of the pessimistic side, but I tend to say, well, I'm going to be optimistic about this. I believe we can do the best. I hope there's people out there that are kind of being watchdogs, making sure everything's okay. And sometimes you're like, I have to be that watchdog, which is scary in that sense, because I don't want to go into a society and see what this bad is, or be the person without the, driving the first car without a safety belt, like, or driving a hard body car. These are things we have to learn, and unfortunately that's how we learn as a society. Is there has to be some loss or some hurt usually
Like, and I'm
before
so
we do anything.
I'm so happy that you alluded to that fractal as well, because it's again, it's this fractal of understanding, and I think of it almost as a spear. That ultimate fractal being represented as a spear, and that fractal being consciousness, and it keeps creating these nodes, and we as humanity just happen to be the tip of the spear, cutting through this experience, learning more and more from it. That, like, one of the things I wanted to say. And then the second thing is, you're talking about the repercussions that this internet space might have, and I feel we can already see it, and it's alluding to the power we have over our experience even more so. Because if you right now want to use the internet to convince yourself that humanity is the biggest scum on this earth, you can do that. You can go and Google, like, watch people die, like horrible videos of the, like the Middle East, executing people, people getting driven over by tanks, people getting burned alive. I'm sorry for the listeners, if this is eliciting responses in you. You can find that information out there on the internet. And if you constantly expose yourself to that, you will, I promise you, ruin your life experience by convincing yourself of the story you keep telling yourself as your awareness is exposed to information that humanity is the scum on the earth. And juxtaposed to that, you can do the exact opposite. You can convince yourself that humanity has been the best thing for this earth. Humanity has been the best thing ever. Going and looking at, make me smile, or things that make me smile, or is it made me smile? Yeah, r/ made me smile. And you see people sharing love with one another. You see people growing within themselves. You see people beating addiction. You see people, like spending time with terminally ill kids. You see kids that are terminally ill having a positive outlook on the world and what death might mean to them. And it shows to me more so than ever in a very tangible way how we as human beings have the ability to create responses for ourselves, experiences for ourselves, depending on what experience we want. And again, kind of eliciting back to the full responsibility that we have to take as these infinite beings for where we are right now, for what it is we're experiencing right now, for what the story is we're telling ourselves right now. And, if people can realize that, if people would actually start implementing that, the world will change overnight.
I think, like you said, I don't think as a person, I think some people are different, of course, but I do think the visceral experience, like say of watching those videos or whatever. Sorry, I don't mean to use it. The word whatever sounds so rude sometimes. I apologize.
Dude, love is true, no matter what.
But I honestly feel that we need to expose ourselves to that too.
And we did.
Um,
We did at one point in our
yeah.
lives. But and we realized what where that could, lead us, and we exposed ourselves to it from a level of awareness. Again, like our awareness knows that that is true, knows that that stuff exists, and it can seek it out to like show it to itself. But the story you tell yourself, like there's this beautiful, Marcus Aurelius quote, or is it Seneca, that goes, "Men are not disturbed by things, but by their thoughts about things." And, like we allowed ourselves to have thoughts about those things, and those were the things that disturbed us. So we just showed ourselves that that power is there for us to feel. And now we decide to use that power for the opposite instead of continuing in that direction.
Hey, listen, I just want to say, is it alright if I mute myself at some point? Like, if I pause, I think I might have to move my car in a little bit, but it's not a point. I just want to know, like,
Like,
if there's something you
absolutely.
could, like, pause.
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. I'll tell you if I need to. But
We're,
yeah, like you were saying, like, yeah,
no, like I just wanted to say, we're about 51 minutes in. So, like, depending on how long you want to keep the podcast on for, I'm here for you until
if
you're.
you want a 3-hour podcast, I'll be here.
Don't you threaten me with a good time.
Yeah, exactly. As I was saying,
Mm,
like the visceral experience, like we were talking about, like I do feel like it brings back my mind to your first podcast, and I only. I'm sorry to say, I have to move it quick. I'll pause quick, 5 seconds. All right.
no problem whatsoever. I'll just, share some love with you, friends. Like you listening right now are appreciated. You listening right now is eliciting the response of my words in your head. Just think about that. Well, technically, what's happening is I'm speaking into a microphone. It's vibrating a membrane. That membrane being vibrated is turning it into ones and zeros, being transmuted into my computer. My computer is combining that of the ones and zeros of the monitor you're looking at right now, the psychedelic visuals you're seeing right now, possibly the voice of my friend as well. Then that gets packed up into ones and zeros again, gets, transmuted into the internet. Your device then extracts that information. You play your phone, literal speaker gets vibrated, or your earphones get vibrated. What, like a pulsing of air hits your eardrums, and you're eliciting binary information from that, and that binary information gets turned into information of words in your brain. Just what the fuck? What the fuck are we doing? We're constantly tripping out. We're hallucinating an experience right now, and the fact that we are a part of this hallucinatory experience together is amazing. The fact that we can create these experiences for one another is amazing. So realizing that we have this power, realizing that we have this capacity to change our worlds, why wouldn't we want to change it for the best? Why wouldn't we want to be heroes? Why wouldn't we want to try and make this world a better place? And you are. I genuinely believe we are. Just by showing up for ourselves, by showing up for the people around us, by smiling at the service people helping you, by, giving your animals some scritches, Maybe, if you're eating a bowl full of, goodies, give your animal like one of them, just to see the joy on their face, even though they might stare at you for the rest of the day to get another whatever it is. Just being able to share love of the world in every single moment is, I believe, one of the most beautiful things that we can do with life. And the more I
Hey,
do it, the more I experience that.
don't you start talking while I'm gone. Like now you feel now I feel like I missed this most motivational speech in the world. Like Alexander the Great just turned around, faced his army, told him like we're gonna march, and told him his most inspirational speech. And I was the guy in the bushes just came out. Hey, what are we doing? You know, like
It was taking a dump and it like walks in and everybody is like super hyped, like, yeah, yeah. And it's like, what's going on? And it's like, oh, Alexander just gave, a kick ass speech. And it's like, fuck, I
no one
missed
will
it.
ever give this great speech again. It was so amazing. It changed my life.
I mean, if
um,
anything, is you have an incentive to go and listen back to your own words. Maybe a year from now, maybe a minute from now, who knows? Thank you, Brother Bay. I was basically just sharing the trippiness of what it is we're doing right now in this moment.
Luckily, I can go listen. Is it right if I continue with damn, I'm gonna use that word a lot, and I've forgotten. It's the same one I was looking for. There is it divulge? Is it divert? It's like
I
I
think it's
use that word so
divert, yeah,
often.
like changing the subject, if you will, and it's completely okay. Like I'm going to redirect, or is also a good way to say.
Well, as I was going on, it's like if you take this footage, like we were saying, just to find my train of thought again, like you see this horribleness in the world, and that's exactly where I was going. Is I listened to your first podcast, and you guys were talking about communions, and I was listening to this, and the first thing that came in my head when you guys were talking about the safety for children, like in a communion, and what it is to have all these different inputs, I immediately shot to like Native American communities, and I thought about like how as a society we tend to grow these type of communities. And usually these communities try and inflict so many multiple roles onto a certain individual. Like say a young man. He has to go through the warrior rule, the warrior part in his life at some time. Because if you create peace on earth or this little bit of heaven and safety for yourself, you need someone to defend it, because in humanity we always have these individuals who tend to want to put hurt in the world instead of love, and you need an individual on your side who's willing to give back hurt and give everything just to protect that. And I feel if you blind yourself to that, you are going to put yourself at serious risk of being that individual who gets taken advantage of. And that is sad to me, but I do feel that we need to look at that sometimes and realize that there is danger in this world and we need people to help navigate it
So like
effectively.
it's so like I'm just feeling so much from your words, and it kind of makes me think of this scenario or perspective. I think might be the better word, where you live in this peaceful world, and everything is sunshine and rainbows, if you will. And because of that perspective, and because that's the only perspective you've ever had, you get angry, you get bitter, you get resentful, and then you might end up hurting others because of that perspective that you had. But by going through these, archetypes, going through these like ways of seeing the world, going through the warrior role, like the way that our parents did, kind of being forced into the military, they got to see a side
Mm,
of the world, hold weapons, see the destructive power of these weapons and their capacity to murder. And because they got to have that perspective, it educates them, it shows them that that is not what you want. And it's this very
mm,
crazy duality where we've probably done this an infinite amount of times as civilizations, where we go and we become so utopian, where everything is perfect, and then things fall apart again because everything is perfect, because we want to see the opposite of that infinity. And I believe we're now in this uptick of trying to reach that utopia. But inevitably, we're going to probably face the disbanding of that as well. And to try and extend our collective good, I feel we would have to educate in a probably a very visceral and real level our youth about the possibilities of horror still. So I'm there with you with what you're trying to say.
Aston, you really get me. Like, bro, I can't wait for the utopia, bro. I want my universal income check tomorrow. Thank you very much.
Yes,
Like,
dude. Like like I genuinely believe, like our goal has been like comfort, and resource allocation has been basically humanity's goal for the last 100 years. Now, since we've
yeah,
basically figured that out, we have the resources to take care of people. I want our next goal to become take care of humans. If we are
yeah,
humanity and we want to pride ourselves in our humanity, take care of humans. The rest will follow. The
yeah.
rest of the money, the rest of the entertainment, the rest of the things that need to be getting done, that will follow if humans are taken care of.
I think, but it's exactly like you said. Like, I'm all for this like paradise. Like, I'm definitely for it. But unfortunately, we as humans, it's been a thing since like the dawn of humanity, I assume, where we chase this perfectness, and people attain some perfectness, and it all crumbles horribly. um, and then it's like we work to something, and then we destroy it all in the name of this perfect place. And it's taking, for example, I think Jordan B. Peterson, like you said, even if we do create this perfect place, this this symphony of greatness in a society, there's gonna be an individual or individuals who look at it in an anarchist way and is like, I'm going to burn down this place or this area or this house simply to show that I'm not a puppet.
Yeah.
I can't be controlled.
And you know what's
And that
beautiful
is
to me? Like I just this, like as you're saying this, I'm thinking about it from again this perspective that love is true. So every single thing I take into my consciousness, I ask myself, is love true? And I can find love even in that response of burning everything down, because if you understand infinity and you convince yourself that something is infinitely beautiful, infinitely perfect, you know that that would be a lie, because within infinity, within perfection, there is nothing that actually reaches that point. So even though things might be perfect from our current perspective, if you find yourself in that perspective and people tell you this is what is perfect, your only response can be to try and destroy it to make something that is even more perfect, or in dispute to it because it can't be perfect.
That's usually the case. It's like people build this wonderful society, and bang, someone's like, "Well, we're gonna have to burn everything down to build it even better." That's the case of like North Korea, for example, as well. Like, you have this society which just wants to destroy everything, and in the process. Unfortunately, to make a biblical analogy, like you're gonna have to do the 40 years in the desert. If you destroy everything and you leave what you as a society have been used to, you're gonna dwell in the desert for 40 years, and it's gonna be one hell of a ride, bro, because you have to re-navigate all those intricacies. Like, it is so common when a country is absolutely destroyed or something of some form economically downtrodden. They have to go through all the corruption, through all the evil, and that in itself is a horrible struggle to deal with as a society. And it takes so long to get out on the promised land, to get to the promised land where you have individuals who are trustworthy in government, individuals that are trustworthy in the police, at least somewhat trustworthy. You need at least a higher percentage of trustworthy individuals in these positions. And that can be so hard when you're dwelling through that metaphorical desert, because all these individuals, every one of them, are trying to survive or one up, because there are some bad individuals here taking resources. And if you're not taking resources as well, guess what? You'll be the next dead guy on the sand tomorrow. Like, and that is a scary proposition, I
So
think.
I'm so happy
Um,
that you share that perspective, because it gives me the opportunity to share this one. I believe for the longest time, things had to work that way, where things were completely, downtrodden, and there was only a limited amount of resources left or available. And if you weren't the one taking those resources, someone else would, leaving you without it.
mm,
But now we're living in this society where abundance is becoming the norm. And instead of, slicing the pie thinner and thinner for more and more people, we're going to be baking more pies. And if you look at, the
Yeah, I
technological
agree.
advancements we're making right now with, robotics, with our ability to actually create things, even with code, like GPT-3 is allowing us to code with words right now. Like I say, create a little search box, give it a search button, give it a logo that says Google on top of it, and then connect that to a
Easy is
search,
that,
and
bro?
it just codes it for you, dude. Like just imagine
Yeah.
all of the intricacies that is going to allow us to be able to create more pie.
Dude, have you been following machine learning?
Oh,
Have
dude,
you been checking it out?
like 2 minute papers is my bread and butter right now, man. What a time to be
And
alive.
what a time to be alive. Hold on to your papers.
Dude, like
Hold
it's
on to
whack, dude.
your
I'm
papers.
looking, and that's why I'm so hopeful. Like there's so many reasons not to be hopeful right now about the future. But I believe this difficulty, this discomfort we're going through right now is us hitting rock bottom on our way back up. Like we're going to be seeing the most whack shit that humanity has ever had access to, dude. And we're lucky. We're so lucky to be in this time of reality. As you're saying, like while you were talking about the internet and how we're the first generation that's being influenced by that, I was again like, we're freaking lucky. Like we have so much information. Like just think about me and you. Like I'm completely there with you on the peasant comment. We would have, if like we were born in the kind of households we were born in right now, if it was like 200, 300 years ago, we would have just been straight like field working peasants. And think about comparing ourselves, exactly the same physiology, exactly the same minds, the way we look, but 300 years ago, not having access to the internet, not having access to all of the information we've exposed ourselves to, we would have been, like the word that's coming up in my mind is lesser, even though I don't like that. We would have been less complete. Let me say it in that way. And because we've had access to all of this information, it equips us to be anything. We have more of the everything that we so we can actually be anything.
That's like you said, like that's the basic building blocks for democracy. Like the founding fathers in the US, you can say what you want about them, but I feel that the constitution they built is pretty well done. Like they relied on the citizenry being very well educated enough to vote in competent leaders. And I feel that every individual needs to be have at least some sort of hunger in some area for knowledge, because if you do that, you're more inclined and more, what's the word, better in a better position to put someone in power who can lead the ship. Because that is the biggest fear, like Socrates, and I don't know if it's Socrates, I think it was someone else who talked about the
Socrates.
dangers of democracy. It was him, wasn't it? Socrates,
Yeah.
who was like, democracy is like a ship with a captain, like you're having a bunch of non-sailors voting in the captain, you're gonna have some problems. And not to drag it political, but it's like you said, it's just about the education. The more the population is educated, and the same with like third world countries, I feel that should be our biggest focus. Like, if all our first world problems, we need to get other countries on the same level as us. The more
Exactly.
countries are on the same level than us, the more it's like I
So can
reference to the
I
cruiser, I think high, it multiplies.
can
Yeah,
I
you
tell
were saying
you can I tell you why it hasn't happened yet? Again, greed.
why?
Because greed, one, and again, there's, zero sum game of there's only that much pie. And then three, like the ecological slash economical result of that. So the developing countries versus the developed countries, those developed countries used a metric fuck ton of energy to be as developed as
Yeah.
they are. And the education of the people basically equip them to utilize their resources, their energy into this betterment. So by giving, these third world countries access to the same amount of information, access to the same amount of education, they're going to evolve and they're going to need the same amount of energy and resources from the world to build the same level of economy, build the same level of society that these developed countries already have. And there is this financial incentive to not let them do that. And that is where we are right now, in this greed mindset of, oh, there's only that much pie, there's only that much earth. We are the ones that are developed. We need to try and keep that power for as long as we possibly can. When if all of us are smarter, all of us are better off. Like, and I feel like humanity is awakening to that fact now finally.
No, like Estian, I agree 100% with you. Like, I think have you heard of the trade deals? Like trade deals in general, like trade agreements.
Oh, of course, you know, like
Have
there's like $10 billion just this year put into the oil industry again.
that I just want to put this like I don't know if you've known, but like first world countries literally go and have these deals, and they're worded to they sound like they're this amazing thing for the country, but what ends up happening is those countries get sued. I don't know if you've heard of that. Like in the world court, companies actually take the whole
Oh,
country to
oh,
court.
oh. I mean,
And
like if you think about, I'm not sure if it's exactly the same line, but I feel it would resonate as well with what you're saying. China, for
100%
example,
because
has its
yeah,
fingers so deep in South Africa right now with importing like what do you call them? Trade, you know,
yeah, yeah,
input
yeah,
harvest. What do you call them exactly? Like
yeah,
basically the place where the ships dock in the country. So
yeah,
what they tell the country is, hey, sign this trade deal with us, you know, and in this trade deal, we're going to build you this massive port, and you won't have to pay
yeah.
a cent for this port, and na 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 na. And it sounds so wonderful, and it sounds so giddy for the country signing this deal. And then when the things get built and the check comes in and they can't actually pay the check, or it like inflates so fast that they won't be able to catch up, they're like, oh, don't worry about this. Like we can either sue you, or, you know, alternatively, you just give us free reign over the port. And then, boom, they have literally a massive line into your country. And it's happening all over the
Yeah.
world right now, taking advantage of
That's
these lesser developed countries.
I don't know if you've I listened to Modern War Institute and a lot of those. I really like military, like anything to do with military in that line. Like it's so cool for me. But yeah, like China is doing that, and it's the part of their strategy. It's pretty scary seeing they have this like long term plan and someone on the head of it navigating it, while we as the democratic countries have this like new guy every 5 years with different policies um, doing his thing. Are you still there? Did
I'm
I
here.
disconnect by any
I'm
chance?
here. No, sorry, I'm just listening very intuitively.
And but like I was saying, like other countries have been doing like the same thing though, except China's way more better equipped at it, in my opinion. Like you have the Dutch, for example. They're the kings at this, dude. Where they come into a country like, say, in the Congo, or a better example would be the US, when Canada. The US and Canada drew up a deal, and again, this is definitely from a very shallow, informative point. So if my numbers are off, please forgive me. But I think it was 100 years ago or something. These trade deals last long times, and they signed a trade deal, and the US was definitely the advantageous one, because what happens is they sign it in such a way where the US is protected from Canadian, like say, too much Canadian influence, but the Canadians are completely the opposite, you know. So if a US company wanted to frack in Canada, for example, all right, and Canada's like, whoa, 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 this is a natural reserve. Sorry, no fracking here. Bang, Canada gets fucking sued, and they get sued hard, and they have to pay out like $200 million in taxpayer money to reprehend for those funds, because they're in breach, or else they're in breach of the trade agreement. And the Dutch have been doing this all over Africa. So it's another way of extracting resources from other countries. Um, and
Dude.
China, yeah, China does the exact same thing, dude. Like they just do it in infrastructure. Like, oh, we'll build these roads for you, and then that's how they control things. And then have you seen those islands, dude?
Yeah,
Like they put.
they're just
I don't
building
I don't
islands.
understand why people are freaking out about that. Like that's been ages ago, of course. This is years ago, but I literally like freak out a little every time I hear they did that, because it's like, if I was Japanese, I would be shitting myself, to be honest.
Oh
Like
yeah, dude.
that is like literally that's like home stretch, you know, that if there's a conflict, they literally have control over that, but that's going to be some bloody fighting to
I don't
take
know if you
that at
know,
any
but they
rate.
basically escalated, you know, the war effort in Taiwan as well now. Like the Chinese troops are starting to like invade, you know, their airspaces and stuff like that. So it's,
I
dude,
saw
it's greed, dude. It's absolute greed. Like I don't understand. Like China is already one of the biggest countries in the entire world. Russia is one of the biggest countries in the entire world, and you see it over and over again when people get into this point of power. And like I would like to preface this by saying these men are intelligent, Putin is probably like a very intelligent man, like Emperor Qing or whatever his name is. They call him Bun, or like the Mian Bao Bao. They call him Bao in China, like as a way to make fun of him because he has a round head. Like they're definitely geniuses. They absolutely know what it is they're doing, but what they're doing is evil. What they're doing is this
No,
greed mentality of trying to, create more power for themselves. But every single time you do that, every single time you put yourself in a place of power, you become fearful of losing that power. And dude, Putin isn't like I don't know if you've seen some of the interviews he does, but people are literally sitting 20 meters away from him. Like he doesn't even allow people close to him right now. And what way is that to live? You might be powerful, but you literally do not trust your own, employees, your own Congress people to the point where you can't even sit close to them. So it's this duality of power being power and you feel powerful for it, and then it separates you from everyone else and it basically ruins your own life experience.
yeah, you're 100% right in that. Like, I think, and you have to like take grievances into account as well. Like, you have like say the Chinese government. That imagine you had a civil war in a country. You had a civil war like the South. Like, I think a great analogy would be America. The North and the South. Imagine the South hit Hawaii. They established a country in the Hawaii. There'd be unfinished business the whole time for your whole
Mm.
country. They'd be like, oh, those bloody traitors, those bosses are just there across. That's actually our country. Those slavers, they're just sitting there across this. It's completely against our ideology. And it's again coming back to what we were talking about, controlling the speech. Like, you have these people sitting on this big massive land looking at those guys, and like they are the exact opposite of what we're striving for. They are literally the shining example of what we don't want in this world.
I am this and they are that.
Yeah, 100%. Like that, and it's like you said, the Putin thing. I'm quite amazed because he's definitely destroying his economy, and I am this whole Ukraine thing again. Like, it's just revealed how sorely planned the Russian military is, and
Oh, they're getting
how
their
they
ass
just want to
handed
throw
to them, dude. Oh yeah. Like
exactly.
they're not winning, by the way. Like the friends, just so like some good news, the Russians are not winning. And like to me, like one of the things that I mentioned, and I feel maybe we'll end the podcast on that note, is even though all of these things are happening, I believe in a lot of ways it's a good thing. On one note, looking at the economy absolutely getting wrecked by these fuel prices, it is pushing people to renewables. So many countries are now basically diverging all of the funds that they planned on spending on like peaker plants, natural gas peaker plants, like fossil fuel burning, like vehicles. All of these countries are pivoting to, being sustainable now because they realize, oh shit, if this is something that's possible and I can literally, my citizens will be suffering, millions of citizens will be suffering and lamenting because of this, it makes more sense to go renewable. So on that level, I feel it can be a good thing coming off of this disaster. And then the second thing, we as humanity, us as a collective, are standing against what's happening right now. Like in a way where we've never been able to stand against something before because we've never had so much interconnectivity. No one, not a single, well, I mean, unless you want to like inspire hatred, not a single person is like actively being like, yes, we want this war. Nuclear Armageddon sounds like a vibe. People that want to die would have been like that, into infinitum. But that is just, human nature as well. I see us as a collective awakening to this fact that war, these resource, disputes are no longer the way we want to continue forward. And Putin, if anything, is being a martyr to show the world once and for all, at least in the start of this, in my opinion, utopia that we're entering into, that that is not the way to continue forward. In that way, like we as a generation didn't really get to see what war looks like, what it can do, like to the economy, to people's lives, to cities. And now, as we're starting in this journey, where we have this opportunity to really see that part of ourselves, really see what that looks like. And I believe that is going to inform us into a beautiful future going forward.
I 100% hope that's the case. I hope this whole energy thing as well, like renewables. I hope we figure it out, like fusion energy. If we can crack that, that'd be a serious win.
We're close.
Otherwise, we're just striking
We've
at it.
we've
Hey,
been close for 40 years, but we're getting
yeah,
closer and closer.
like minuscule steps. I'm really praying for that one. Like if we can get it, because I honestly believe that the electric cars and that, like, it's not the bandwagon we think it is. I think we're gonna pay on that one still. Like since I've gotten into the electrical industry, I really have my qualms about electric cars.
Like you would
I
know,
think
dude.
Japan. Yeah, I think Japan's more ahead with the hydrogen. I know hydrogen's a bitch to store. Don't get me wrong. I'm not too clued up on it, but I know that the main issue is the supply lines. But we can't keep with these rare earth metals. It's an over reliance on production from China and Africa for these
So
batteries.
I'm
And
there with you, but the nice thing about that is as soon as it's mined, those batteries technically never have to go to waste again. We can infinitely recycle them. And that is something that is in complete juxtaposition to hydrogen. I mean, hydrogen gets turned into water when it gets burned, so that is pretty cool, or gets used. And but electricity, like that's the biggest thing. We already have the infrastructure. All of us have access to electricity right now at our homes. So that's the most sustainable thing to do if we're going to go into the future. And like I mean my dad works in the mining industry, so I'm very much there with you on the other side of well of like the amount of ecological turmoil and damage that does to our planet to extract these metals. But I mean, if we figure out space mining, we can literally just catch an asteroid and have all of the metals we'll ever need.
fair enough. Yeah, 100%. Yeah, I just hope that's the case. Like if we can recycle it, I thought like once these batteries are used,
Oh no.
that's just straight up
Oh
waste.
no no
There's
no!
no
Like you can
disposing
use
of them.
them. You can actually use them infinitely, dude. So that's the nice thing about the battery like industry as well right now, is that going into the future, a larger and larger percentage of the materials being used is going to be old decommissioned batteries.
Do you think so? Like,
I know.
should we quickly
They're
Google?
already doing that. Yeah, they're already doing that. That you can go and check. I don't.
I'm checking now.
Let's check
Jim,
what the percentage is.
electric car batteries can be used as home power batteries. What do you
So
do
that can
with
be
used
so.
car
So
batteries?
what they do there is basically after the battery gets decommissioned from the car, they get put into a home system because it doesn't need that much punch, versus having like torque on an electric motor versus running your computer or whatever. But then the opposite of that is you can actually just disassemble those batteries and use the metals, battery metals.
Oh, I thought the metals were kind of mindset because of like the process.
Nope, 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 nope.
Um,
So recycling of battery metals still to boom. As a result, by 2025, about 75% of spent EV batteries will be reused in second life solutions, after which they will be recycled to recover all of the metals.
and then could they reuse those metals? Because I thought chemically it kind of like makes it useless. It makes it lose those properties.
So, like, the nice thing is these metals, like, metal is one of the great things. Like, I believe one of the things we're going to be going into in our future as well is we're going to be transitioning away from plastics and be using aluminium for most of the things that we actually do. So, like, all of our water bottles will be aluminium and those things will just get recycled, dude. Like, it's so easy to recycle metals, exponentially easier than it is to do plastics or anything else.
I agree 100% with that. We need to move from plastics. I've been telling my girlfriend, like, you need to go to the store with a bunch of aluminium containers. That's a brilliant way of putting it. I was saying, like, boxes or something, like, even if it was plastic, as long as they just reuse them. Like, where you go to a store and you just, like, go to a machine and I want 2.5 kgs of sugar, fill up your container of sugar. I want 2.5 liters of milk and pop in your milk. Um, just as long as you reuse those containers instead of having to go through this packaging. Because as an electrician, like I've seen so much waste, bro. Like if I go through so much plastic in a day, and it's amazing how much plastic and stuff a construction site goes through.
Dude,
Like you wouldn't expect there to be so much wastage, but there's still so much wastage, and all these products, packaging, you name it.
things getting stripped, things like the packaging they came in, dude. It's kind
Yeah.
of bonkers where we are right now, and I'm so happy that people are waking up. Like That's what I keep seeing. Like, even though there are all of these things happening, people are waking up. Me and you, Armand, I've been awake for a while now, dude. Like, think about the conversations we had as, like, me as a 16-year-old, you as an 18-year-old. Like, we already had, was it 17 and 18? Like, we already had insight that I feel a lot of the
Mm.
world might be lacking that young. And we're not the only ones. There are hundreds of millions of us having these ideas, having these feelings, having these understandings of where the future is supposed to go. And we will. I believe it. I'm saying it, into this world, manifesting it, even if you want to call it that, the positive future that we want.
Yeah, I'm all on that train, 100%. I hope the same.
Brother Bear, thank you for joining me on the podcast. Like, that was an hour and 24 minutes like that.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was super cool. I enjoyed it as much as I thought I would. I hope we can do another one.
We will. We absolutely will, Brother Bear. I look forward to having you next time again. If you want to do next time,
Yeah,
or like we can split it out a little bit further.
yeah, fair. Whichever you want, whatever is comfortable for you. I assume you're lined up with some serious talent next week. I'll probably miss out on that one.
Brother
I'll go
Bear,
for
you're
whichever you
serious
find.
talent yourself, man. Like, this chat was absolutely divine. Thank you so much for it. I cannot thank you enough, genuinely.
Oh, same as down. Again, appreciated talking to you. It was an awesome conversation. Thanks for allowing me this experience. It was real awesome. You guys better like and subscribe to Estian. Like, you won't get this opportunity again. Be in the first 100K. Like, don't miss out when everyone's following. Yeah, that's all I want to say.
I love you to bits, Armand. Thank you, brother. I look forward to being able to see you and give you a hug again, man.
Same. Have you so how does